She walked into my courtroom holding a cane, wearing dark glasses and moving with slow, careful steps, every detail designed to convince. I've seen lies before, exaggerations, even attempts to manipulate the system, but this felt different. If she was telling the truth, then what happened to her was serious. If she wasn't, then this was one of the boldest lies I had ever seen. I said nothing at first, just watched, because in my courtroom observation always comes before judgment. She made her way to the plaintiff's table, carefully feeling each step as if she couldn't see a thing. The room fell silent, almost too silent, as everyone tried to decide whether this was real or an act. I looked at the file. A personal injury claim. She was suing a local business owner for $10,000, claiming that an accident had left her partially blind. That wasn't a small accusation, it was life-changing. So I began as I always do. "Ma'am, can you tell me what happened?" I asked. Her voice was soft, measured, almost fragile. "I lost my vision after I slipped in his store," she said, pointing slightly close, but not perfectly. "He didn't clean the floor. There was water everywhere." I turned to the defendant, a middle-aged man who looked nervous but alert. "Is that true?" I asked. He immediately shook his head. "No, Your Honor. That's not what happened." His response was quick, his denial strong, interesting, because now there were two completely different realities. I leaned back slightly. "Then tell me what did happen." He took a breath. "She walked in just fine. No cane, no glasses, nothing." The tension in the courtroom shifted. Someone wasn't just wrong. Someone was lying, and not about something small, but something life-altering. I looked back at her, but she didn't react, not to his statement, not to the accusation, nothing. And that caught my attention, because people who are falsely accused usually react emotionally, immediately. But she stayed still, too still, almost controlled. I asked her how long she had been visually impaired. "Since the accident," she replied without hesitation. "And when was that?" 3 months ago." Her answers were quick, clean, maybe too clean. I studied her movements again, the way she held the cane, the way she turned her head slightly when someone spoke. Small details matter. The truth doesn't need perfection, but lies often appear too perfect. I changed direction. "Do you have medical documentation?" She nodded and slowly reached into her bag, pulling out a folder and placing it on the table. Every movement deliberate. I opened the file. Doctor reports, test results, signatures, everything looked legitimate, and that's what made this case dangerous. When a lie is supported by paperwork, it becomes much harder to detect. But something still didn't sit right with me, that instinct that only appears when something is off. I looked at her, then at the defendant. He wasn't just denying her claim, he was waiting for something. And that told me he knew something I didn't yet. So I asked him, "If she wasn't blind when she entered your store, how can you prove it?" He didn't answer right away. Instead, he reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and said something that changed everything. "Because I have it on camera." The room froze, completely. Because now this wasn't just a claim, this was about to become evidence. And if what he said was true, this entire case was about to collapse. But I've learned one thing over the years. Evidence doesn't just reveal the truth, it exposes intention. And whatever was on that phone was about to do exactly that, in a way no one in that courtroom was ready for. The moment he said, "I have it on camera," the entire courtroom shifted. That quiet tension grew heavier instantly, because now this wasn't just about claims anymore, it was about proof. I looked at him and said, "Show me." He unlocked his phone, scrolled for a moment, and then handed it over to the bailiff. "This is from the day of the incident," he said. I took the phone and focused on the screen, honestly curious, because if what he said was true, this case was about to take a very different turn. The video began to play, a black and white surveillance clip showing the store entrance. The door opened and she walked in, no cane, no sunglasses, just normal, steady steps. Confident. The courtroom shifted and I didn't stop the video. I watched carefully. She moved through the aisle, looking at products, walking naturally, with no hesitation in her body language. Then suddenly she stopped, looked down, and slipped hard. The video ended. Silence filled the room. Complete silence. I placed the phone down slowly and looked at her. She didn't react, no shock, no panic, no immediate explanation. That stood out to me. People who are truly injured react. They defend themselves, they explain. But she stayed completely still. I leaned forward slightly. "You walked into that store without a cane." No response. "You weren't wearing glasses." Still nothing. "And your movements show no signs of impairment." She finally looked up slightly and said, "That was before." "Before. Interesting." I repeated, "Before?" She nodded. "Before my condition got worse." Now the story was shifting carefully, slowly, but it was shifting. I replayed the video in slow motion because details matter. When she fell, her reaction was immediate shock, pain, confusion. That part looked real, which made things more complicated. Now the question wasn't just fake or real, it was, when did it happen? I looked at her again. "So you're saying your vision worsened after the fall?" "Yes," she replied quickly, but this time there was pressure in her voice. I continued, "Then explain something to me." Leaning forward slightly. If your vision was affected immediately, why is there no medical record right away? Silence. Again, she hesitated. I went later? Later? I asked, how much later? And why later? I checked the file again, medical documents, dates, timeline, and that's when I found it. I looked back up at her. Your first documented medical visit was nearly 2 weeks after the incident. A small shift rippled through the courtroom. Now there was a gap in the story. If your vision was severely affected, why wait 2 weeks? I asked. She wasn't silent anymore. It got worse over time. She said, defensive, immediate. And that was important, because when someone reacts like that, it means control is slipping. I studied her closely. Or did something else happen during those 2 weeks? Silence. Heavy silence. The kind that tells you something is about to break. Everyone in the courtroom was watching her now, waiting, and I could feel it. This case wasn't finished yet. What we were seeing was only part of the truth, and when only part of the truth is revealed, the full truth is never far behind. I leaned back slightly and said calmly, I think there's more to this story. And at that moment, I knew what came next would change everything in a way no one expected. I could feel it. The case was about to shift, not slightly but completely. I looked at both of them and said something that changed the energy in the room. We're missing something. Silence followed, and everyone leaned in a little more. Because when I say that in my courtroom, it usually means the truth is about to come out. I turned to the defendant. You said you have more evidence. He nodded. Yes, Your Honor. Reaching into his bag, he pulled out a small envelope and handed it over. This wasn't supposed to be part of the case. But I think it's important. I opened the envelope slowly. Inside were printed messages, text messages, complete with dates and times. I started reading, and as I did, the tone in the room shifted again. Because what I was seeing didn't match her story. Not at all. I looked up. These messages are between you and the plaintiff. Yes, he replied. I turned the papers toward her. Do you recognize these? She looked at them, and for the first time her expression changed just slightly. A flicker, a crack. Yes, she said, but her voice was no longer steady. I read one message out loud. Don't worry. If anything happens, I'll take care of you. I paused, then continued with another. Just follow my plan. Everything will be fine. A few gasps rippled through the courtroom. Because now this wasn't just about an accident anymore. I leaned forward. Explain this. She swallowed. Those messages were from before. Before what? I asked. Before the accident. Now we had timing issues. I continued. And why would you be discussing a plan before the incident? She hesitated longer this time. We were talking about support. The word felt weak and insufficient. I didn't respond right away. I just watched her. Because when people lie, they don't just speak, they adjust, and I could see it happening. I looked back at the messages. One line stood out. If something goes wrong, we can say it was an accident. The room fell into a dead silence. I looked up slowly. Explain this. Her breathing changed faster now, less controlled. That's taken out of context, she said. But now that explanation wasn't enough. Context should clarify things, not make them worse. I leaned back slightly. So let me understand. I said, locking eyes with her. You were planning something before the incident, and now you're claiming this was a random accident. No answer. For the first time, she didn't have one. The defendant stepped forward slightly. Your Honor, I didn't want to say this earlier. But she asked me for money. The courtroom reacted instantly. Now it was escalating fast. I raised my hand. Slow down. Start from the beginning. He nodded. She said she needed help. That she was in trouble. And if I didn't help her, something would happen. I turned back to her. Did you threaten him? She shook her head quickly. No. I never threatened him. But her voice was louder now, defensive, emotional. And that's when I knew something deeper was going on. Because this case wasn't just about blindness or money or injury. It was turning into something much bigger, something intentional. I leaned forward. Then why does it look like this wasn't an accident at all? The silence filled the room, heavy, pressing silence. And in that silence I saw it. The moment, the shift, the breaking point. We were getting closer to the truth, the kind of truth that changes everything. Because this story wasn't over, not even close. The courtroom had changed completely. What started as a simple injury claim had turned into something far more serious. I looked at her and said, there's something you're not telling me. Silence followed, longer this time, heavier. Everyone in the room could feel it. We were getting close. She finally spoke. I didn't lie. I just didn't explain everything. That's a dangerous sentence. It's not a full denial, and it's not a full confession. It lives somewhere in between. And in my courtroom, that middle ground doesn't last long. I leaned forward. Then explain everything now. She hesitated just a second, but in court, even a second matters. I needed the money. She admitted. And there it was, the truth beginning to surface. Slowly, carefully, but finally something real. I was behind on bills. I was struggling. I asked him for help. I turned to the defendant. Did you agree to help her? He nodded. Yes, interesting. The story was shifting again, but this time both sides held pieces of the truth, which meant this wasn't just a simple lie anymore, it was something more complicated. So what changed? I asked. She looked down. He stopped responding. Then she looked back up. I got desperate. That word desperation changes everything, because desperate people don't always think clearly. They take risks. They cross lines. Sometimes they create situations they can't control. I turned back to the messages and these texts. She sighed. I didn't want to threaten him. I just wanted him to take me seriously. But words matter, especially in writing. Written words don't disappear, don't shift with tone, they stay. And sometimes they come back to hurt you. I looked at him. Why didn't you report this earlier? He hesitated, because I thought she would stop. I nodded slightly, and instead. This happened. Both of them fell silent, because now the situation was clear, just not in the way anyone expected. I leaned back, my tone calm but firm. Let me be clear. This court does not tolerate deception. I looked at her. If you lied about your condition, that is serious. Then I turned to him. But if you were involved in creating or influencing this situation, that is just as serious. The room held its breath. This wasn't about winning or losing anymore, it was about accountability. I paused, letting everything settle. Then I said, there is still one thing I need to confirm. I looked directly at her. Did you truly experience a medical condition? Or did this situation escalate beyond your control? She didn't answer right away, and that hesitation told me everything. Because sometimes silence speaks louder than any words ever could. I closed the file slowly. We are going to take a brief recess, but before stepping away, I looked at both of them one last time. When we return, I expect the full truth, and as I left the bench, I knew something important. This case wasn't just about who was right or wrong. It was about how far people will go when they feel they have nothing left to lose, and whatever came next would reveal exactly that. The courtroom felt different when we came back, heavier, like something was about to break, and honestly, it was. I sat down and looked at both of them. We're going to finish this today. No one spoke because now there was no running from the truth. I turned to her. This is your final opportunity to explain everything. She took a deep breath, longer this time, heavier, and then she began. I didn't plan to hurt anyone. I was desperate. I needed money. Her voice shook slightly. He stopped helping me. I felt like I had no choice. I listened carefully because now this wasn't just about facts, it was about emotion, and emotion changes behavior. I leaned forward slightly. So you're saying this situation was created out of desperation? She nodded slowly. Yes. Then she added something unexpected. But I didn't think it would go this far. Silence. That's the moment. Because most situations like this don't start with evil intentions, they start with pressure, fear, and desperation. I turned to him. What about you? He straightened up. I tried to help her. But I also felt pressured. She kept asking, and I couldn't keep giving. Now both sides were admitting something important. This wasn't a one-sided lie, it was a chain reaction. I leaned back, so let me summarize. I looked at both of them. You both entered a situation that escalated due to poor decisions, pressure, and miscommunication. The courtroom stayed silent because now it wasn't as simple as guilt or innocence, it was accountability. But that does not excuse dishonesty. I looked directly at her. If you exaggerated or misrepresented your condition, that is a serious issue. Then I turned to him. And if you withheld information or contributed to this escalation, that is also a problem. Now the weight shifted again because both of them were responsible in different ways, but responsible nonetheless. I opened the file once more. Medical reports do confirm that you suffered an injury. But they do not fully support the severity you claim. That was key, not fully, not completely, but partially. Which meant there was truth, but also exaggeration. I closed the file. This court will not reward dishonesty. But this court also recognizes when situations become complicated. And this case is exactly that. I leaned forward slightly. The question now is not just what happened, but what is fair. And at that moment, everything depended on the next decision, the final one that would bring this case to an end once and for all.